affirmative asylum comes about because a person is eligible to file for asylum before they go to immigration court. Typically, the person is in perfectly legal status and wants to file an asylum application because things are just terrible at home, absolutely terrible at home. I have some clients from Yemen who worked years on getting their asylum case approved, and it was approved, and they were able to stay in the U.S. And it was one on the affirmative way. That is, they filed their application with the asylum office because in this case they're physicians. The physicians were in status, so there's no removal. That you file with the asylum office, and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years later, they call you in for your interview. And that kind of wait is common. And they call you in for your interview, and it's very informal. It's in front of a adjudicator. It's not in front of a judge. They're very friendly when they do their interviews. They're not out to get the person, and they want to bring the person in so that they'll be trusting and say everything that's on their mind. And so that application, once the hearing has been held, the asylum officer makes a decision as to whether or not the applicant has met their burden of proof. If they have not met their burden of proof, then the case is not denied. It's referred to the immigration court. And then a hearing can be scheduled to just consider the asylum application by a judge. Now, 90% of the asylum cases that are granted come after a hearing with the judge because the asylum office basically denies everything. But that's the system. Now, if the person is in status, like my clients, these doctors that I represent, they've always been in status. If their case was denied by the asylum office, they don't put them in removal proceedings because they're here legally. And so that's the only shot the person has for asylum, unless there is a huge change in country conditions, or the U.S. declares that this particular class of people are eligible for asylum in the United States. And so it's a very difficult process to get asylum, because in many cases, much of the evidence is to educate the judge about country conditions where the person is. And again, with asylum, expert witnesses are absolutely critical. Perfect example is of the 23 cases I was talking that are all in a group together. In those 23 cases, we used an expert witness about country conditions in the Punjab region of India. Now, the judge is a typical judge and sees lots of Indian clients, but is not really versed in the nitty-gritty of the person's life and at home, and why they want to apply for asylum. And so much of the time is spent either educating the asylum officer or educating the judge. I like being in immigration court because I can put on witnesses, which I can't do in an asylum interview, except in a rare case. I can argue the law, which they don't want to hear in the asylum interview. They just want the facts, and they'll apply the law as they understand it. The other thing is, if you lose in immigration court, and goes back to what I said about the hearing last Monday, where the judge stopped the government from taking away the ability to appeal after a removal hearing. But there is an appeal to the BIA. And you can win it at the BIA. I got 25 people's cases reopened, and all 25 of them ultimately were able to immigrate. All 23 of the 25 were able to immigrate. And so that's an extreme case. It's probably the biggest group case I've ever worked on. What happened at the Board of Immigration Appeals, where they overturned 30 or 40 different decisions to allow these folks to get another bite of the apple. And so the case turned out and had a very happy ending. All 23 of them had very happy endings. This all occurred in the last 2 years, or 5 years, last 5 years. Defensive asylum is when you find yourself in front of the immigration judge. So you start off with an affirmative case and it turns into a defensive case because you're in immigration court. Now, if you're already in immigration court and you want to file for asylum, you can, but of course it's going to be a defensive case because you're in front of the immigration court. The immigration court approval rate in asylum cases range from a high end of maybe 40% to less than 2%. And you have to do research about who your judge is, what's the court, what's the judge's history, what percentage of asylum cases do the judges grant. You have to know all that. First of all, you might want a judge to recuse themselves in certain circumstances. And even if you don't want the judge to recuse themselves, they have to understand everything because you want the benefit of asylum being granted. And a lot of times they'll say, well, yeah, I'm seeing persecution, but it's not extreme. Or, oh, well, your evidence of persecution is just your story. And we need more than just your story. Well, that's not what the law says. If you're credible enough, you don't even need to file anything other than the form. That never happens, but the bottom line is the law does allow for that in certain circumstances. The one thing is very critical, and that's supporting evidence in immigration court. You need to have a ton. That's all I can tell you. You need a ton of evidence because the scales are weighted against the applicant for asylum. That's why so few people get asylum, because they interpret the statute very, very strictly. Country condition evidence is absolutely essential, and documentation of what happened to your client is absolutely essential. That's what judges want to see. They want to see what happened before they came to the U.S. and what happened afterwards. And there are certain things that knock out asylum cases. One of them is that if you've been in the United States more than a year and then you want to apply for asylum, the burden of proof becomes very, very high and almost impossible to meet. They deny cases all the time because of the one-year filing deadline. And you cannot miss that deadline. If you miss that deadline, it becomes a very complicated case. It can still be won, but you have to have a lot of country conditions report to demonstrate that the persecution is real and it is continuing, or it began after the person came to the United States. If there's a big enough change in country conditions abroad or a big enough change within the applicant for asylum, you can overcome the one-year bar. And that's the single biggest bar that there is to getting asylum cases heard and won. Yes, I'll give you an example. Many years ago in the 1980s, right after the Iranian Revolution, the U.S. Passed legislation that would allow Iranians, certain Iranians, a fairly easy path to becoming a permanent resident. For example, I represented a bunch of Baha'is. Baha'i is a religion, modern religion. It exists in Iran. That's where it started. And the Iranian government hated the Baha'is because the Baha'is would not convert to Islam, for one thing. And they were viewed as being disloyal in Iran. Well, the U.S., after they received enough evidence, had a system set up so that if the Baha'i person has an official membership card from the Baha'is in their home country or Baha'is in the U.S. saying that they were members of the faith and they had been for some time, they automatically got asylum. And all you have to do is submit the proof of membership in the Baha'i faith and the asylum case would be granted immediately. That's an example of country conditions as well as the statute itself coming together at the same time and creating a very positive atmosphere for asylum applicants from Iran back in the 1980s. Today, even though they persecute their people terribly, today there will never be an Iranian asylum case granted because of the politics of the situation. That's what you need to bear in mind. It's not asylum, it's called political asylum. And the first word is political. It's not a meaningless word. The politics of it have to do with the US's relationship with their country. And if it's bad enough the person may qualify for asylum. So that's also a very critical factor you must bear in mind when doing these asylum cases. It comes up regularly, and so you have to be aware of it.